to see you today. Wow. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. All right. Well, I returned from Odessa, Ukraine, and if you are friends with me on Facebook, you saw the two posts, one about all the interesting things I saw, and the other one about the conference that I attended. So I want to talk a little bit this morning about this conference and some observations of mine that I think really are very important, I think, for us. You know, it's not just me going on a trip, really. As I said before I went, I took everyone with me there. So what was I doing there? I was speaking at a leadership conference. There are several different networks of congregations, of Messianic Jewish congregations in Ukraine. So we all know Boris Golden. Boris works with Chosen People Ministries, and he comes here perhaps once a year. So he developed, really, he sort of mentored a group of about 20 to 25 leaders around the Ukraine, and he encourages them and speaks to them, and really has done a great job of, through both Chosen People Ministries and the UMJC, who sponsored this conference, really have met tremendous humanitarian needs that you can imagine would be there. So people from you can turn on the here we go. Okay. So leaders came from different places in the Ukraine, and this was the map that at least you could see the names of places. So where I was in Odessa, here, in the southwest corner, where since no airports are available in the entire country of Ukraine right now, I flew into Chisinau, which in Russian is called Kishinev, in Moldova, right? So here we are. Here's Moldova, here's Romania, here is Russia, Belarus, Poland, and here, of course, is Ukraine. So people came to Odessa from Mariupol, from Kharkiv, from Kyiv, and all other places, even from the northwestern and western part of Ukraine, came down to Odessa. Okay? Now, people have asked me, how was your experience, given the fact that there's a war there, of course, in the whole country? What I personally experienced was easy stuff, a lack of electricity. So I brought my run headlamp with me. So here I am in a dark hotel room at about 85 degrees, going over my notes for the next day. No worries, but that was really, for me, that was the only thing. Of course, I will say there was a real answer to prayer here, because a little transparency, some of you may know this, I use a CPAP machine, right? And so I was a little concerned about this without electricity, right? So the first few nights were a little difficult, but then thankfully, for the last half of my time there, the last 4 or 5 days, there was electricity mostly at night, and so thank the Lord that I was able to have that. Okay. So here is me and Boris. You recognize Boris. And this is Valentin, who is the leader. He and his wife Tatiana are the leaders of Or HaMashiach congregation, a congregation in Odessa. And they hosted the event. They're not actually part of Boris's network, but everybody knows everybody there. And so they were so kind to host it. They have a big warehouse it's on a main street. It's very interesting, very nondescript looking building that is their building, and very functional, and you'll see a few pictures from the interior. But they were really very kind to us. That is the Black Sea behind us, right at the sea. And it just so happens, see in the background above Val's hat, you see there's like a darkened building. Okay, so that is a building that was bombed in the war recently, before I was there. And that is where the real concern is around the seaport, just by the way. But anyway, people have asked me, what did you see? Well, I saw that. And there you go. All right. Okay. So this is Valentin and Tatiana. And everybody has a great story, let me tell you. So they are the leaders of this congregation in Odessa. But back in 1988, they were able to leave the Soviet Union. And it's a long story. You know, they were in Europe for a while, and then they ended up in the United States. And they were in Dallas, and they were attending Baruch Hashem congregation, a congregation where we know very well, and also a church in the area. And they were asked to do some translation work for a ministry in the Ukraine, but they were living in Texas. To make a long story short on them, they were challenged to go back to Odessa in the 1990s. And their first response was something to the effect of, there is no way that's going to happen. You know? But the Lord spoke to them, and I believe it was around 1997 or so, they returned to Ukraine and planted this congregation. And they're pretty well known in our movement because for years there was a Bible Institute that they hosted in Odessa, and many of our colleagues and friends have been there. That Bible Institute no longer exists, but these are people who really are just a wonderful ministry couple and doing a great work there in Odessa. There's actually 3 or 4 congregations in Odessa. Odessa is a huge city, right? And so there's more than one congregation, but this is the folks that hosted us. Okay? All right, so I spoke in their Shabbat morning service. And of course, I spoke about, it was Bamidbar in the wilderness, and I talked about the Jewish value of Kalal Yisrael, all Israel is one. And so I gave them a gift, and part of the gift that we received, right, that I took with me, and it was really well received, and it was a great opportunity there. And this is just part of the worship there, and I do have. You can go ahead and Kevin do that. I wanted to play a little bit of this worship song. It was really just so wonderful. Let's see. We're gonna hopefully have that in a minute, and even though that is Ukrainian. On the screen there. And of course, I did not know the language, but, you don't have to know the language when you're worshiping. And it really was a wonderful moment. Let's see. We'll just wait another second here, and hopefully, yeah. Just a little bit of the worship music. And you may have noticed, I think it's from the previous one here. Yeah. Can you see the words on the screen? Yeah, you can see them. They're small. But do you notice that it's of course supposed, Hebrew, right? Hebrew song. But in order for them to transliterate into to be able to sing it, they use English letters, which is really very interesting. And I asked, of course, and they said, well, because the sound is closer to Hebrew when you put the words together. And so what I surmise, what I think I observed is probably people have memorized what it looks like. They don't actually use Hebrew. They don't put up actual Hebrew. So it's really just an interesting observation. But the worship was wonderful. And in what you saw, did you notice that the worship leader is from Asia, right? So everybody has a story. So she is an architect, and the main worship leader of this congregation had to leave because her husband had to go in the army. And so they had to go to a different city. And so this worship leader had led this person to the Lord. And she had become part of the congregation. And so she became the worship leader. She is born and raised in Ukraine, but her family is from Vietnam. And so just, a wonderful demonstration of the unity of nations, and wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so this picture is the reason I posted this picture is just the joyful expressions of these people. This was sort of a candid a picture of us all standing and sitting around talking, and so someone said, "Hey, I'm going to take a picture." There it is, and so just real joy. This is the group of people who came. Some people were not able to make it because it's hard to travel. There. Most people came by train, actually, from the different cities where they come from. This is we had our meals together, and just a wonderful setting, a wonderful fellowship, and so on. The folks from this congregation were fantastic. Okay. So this gentleman, his name is Nikita, and he was my main translator. And he was so good that I actually finished my material a little early. And then, this is how God works. And I added some things, and it turned out to be what I added really needed to be said. So, that's how God works. As I was speaking, he was translating. Usually you have to stop and, so he was fantastic. He was fantastic. And we had great. So this is the setting. Here's me doing the teaching. At the beginning, Valentin, who you saw earlier, the leader of the congregation, was doing the translating for a little bit, but Nikita did most of it. But this is the setting. Everyone's sitting there and we're doing our thing. Okay, now some stories of people. Okay, so this is Andre and Natasha. They lead a congregation near Lviv, which is in western Ukraine, of about 30 people. Okay. Here, I guess I can show you that. I did this on purpose. Yeah, here they are. So they're over here, town just east of Lviv. Okay? Now, let me go back for a second. So about 3 or 4 years ago, before the war, Natasha had a dream that there was going to be a war and that they needed to accumulate humanitarian supplies, which they did. Okay? So when the war began, these people, Anatoly and Victoria, they lived in Mariupol, here. Now, that might sound a little familiar. The only way I heard about it was on the news about the great destruction of this city at the beginning of the war. You see how close it is to Russia, right near the border, right? So this is a congregation of about 250 people, okay? There are some, I guess this would be a good place to say this. Historically, there are congregations in Ukraine that are large. What some would call the largest Messianic Jewish congregation in the world is in Kyiv. Okay? When I was in Russia back in 2013, the translator came from that congregation, well-known congregation. And then this congregation in Mariupol. I have the names of everything, but I can't. Oh, I guess I can see it. It's okay. Yeah, their congregation is called Kehilat Yeshua, and all of the every congregation in Ukraine has lost people. They're all smaller, every one of them, and they've lost people either to the war or to people moving away, to just people leaving Ukraine. Many Jewish people have left Ukraine. Many have gone to Israel, actually, and other places. But this congregation moved almost all together to over here near Lviv. They were so cohesive and organized that when they knew they had to leave the city, they all went across the country to here, where these people are. Because there's a network, they know each other, and so on. And so this congregation near Lviv took in everybody. And more so, they said it was about 300 people that they ended up housing, feeding, and taking care of. Okay? So now after this congregation in Mariupol sort of got their footing, after a little while of being all together near Lviv, they decided to split up. And so one group together went to Poland, another went to Germany, another went to the Netherlands, another went to Canada. And twice a week, Anatoly meets with them on Zoom, with everybody, with the whole group. And their plan is to return to Mariupol and to repair their building that they had there. And so, just so you know, I gave him and his congregation, him and his wife and their congregation, some of the funds that we had received for their building. And so, just real cohesiveness in these people. Okay. Now, this gentleman's name is Sergei Pinchuk. I asked a question during our meetings. Was one of the questions, what did you do at the very beginning of the war? How did, what did you say to your people? And what I discerned from everybody's responses is that it wasn't really a case of answering like, how could God do this to us? What's going to happen to us? Like, that kind of thing. It fell into two categories. One was, the issue of getting out of the city or helping our people with their needs, humanitarian needs, or what he said, what Sergei said. We started having prayer meetings every day. That was the response, where we started having prayer meetings every day. And there you go. It just tells you really something about them. So he was from this area, just west of Kyiv, and up here near Chernobyl, actually. Okay. All right. Now, this couple, Alexander and his wife, Tatiana, are from Kharkiv, and they have been in the news these days, right? A tremendous difficulty. But they are, continuing on. And the reason I have his picture here is mostly because he led the early morning shacharit. This network of congregations is I would say pretty traditional in their practice, and he did a good job. I would say that my observation is that there's a little bit of Hebrew, but mostly Russian, like in the in the prayers. Now I did ask all these people when they became believers in Yeshua, and they all had the same answer, right? In the early 1990s. Maybe one was a little bit later, but the early 1990s. Why the early 1990s? That's very significant, right? And that's just what all the leaders in Russia said to me when I was there in the past. Same thing, early 1990s. Because there was this tremendous outpouring of the Ruach in Eastern Europe at the end of the Soviet Union. Like after the Berlin Wall came down and a tremendous number of Jewish people came to know the Lord. You may remember, if you were part of our movement back then, that Jonathan Bernis and his people put on these gigantic festivals, filling stadiums at that time, and it was an amazing thing where people were. It was like Jewish God Yeshua all at once, So these people actually became believers before those festivals. And because I asked them, I said, did you come to faith during the festivals that Jonathan Bernis put on? And they said, no, we helped them, with those. These congregations go back a ways. And they're a good example of a group that has become quite small, and they're meeting with another group these days. Okay, and here's Kharkiv right here. Again, very close to the border. Okay. Now this couple, this is Alexander and Alla. They live in Kyiv. They live in Kyiv. And when I was describing our service, everything we do and how we do it, they told me that, wow, we do like the same thing. Like our service sounds just like your service. And even the Oneg luncheon afterwards. Very, very similar. But they told me a very interesting story about the beginning of the war. So I'm not real familiar with the geography of Kyiv or of the Ukraine, really. So there's a river that runs through the center of the city and divides it into east and west. And there are a series of bridges that you cross to get from one side to the other. So all the bridges were closed. So what they did is they contacted all the people of their congregation, and every Erev Shabbat, every Friday night, they would go to a home of someone and maybe another family might join in, and they would have a little Erev Shabbat dinner and a service. And they did this week after week, and they figured out a way to get to the other side of the river, but they could not have their services. Now, thankfully, they are having their services again. Okay. Here we are. Okay, so now this is Shavuot. Now, I'm going to tell you, one afternoon, Tuesday afternoon, Shavuot was Wednesday. Tuesday afternoon in our course, the course was about having stable congregations. Usually we would call it congregational development or something like that. And so the way I framed the whole thing was that they are, extremely important people in their country, that they are providing a refuge, and that their congregations are places of refuge. And so what we want to do in our week together is to strengthen your places of refuge, and it was really very helpful. I talked about everything we do in our membership classes and beyond. I talked about core values and mission and vision, and I talked about discipleship, and that we are discipleship-making entities. Whether we're talking about sharing the good news, whether we're talking about training up brand new Messiah followers, whether we're talking about more teaching and equipping and serving and all of that. And if you have been in our membership class and remained awake the entire time, you may remember that visual of the Star of David, and around it says discipleship, teaching, serving, equipping. So I used that a lot, and they really resonated with that. And the discipleship materials that I talked about and described and used in the class, you might say, what did they really resonate with? The discipleship materials was really very helpful. And then core values. The reason I talked about core values was not just to have them, but you can define messianic in so many different ways around the world, right? What does it mean? So we have a UMJC definition statement that we talked about, but I said that, they're very diverse, but there are boundaries, and the way that you understand your boundaries is by your values. What are your values? Your values is what you're going to do. And so when I said that, Boris got up and he said, pay attention to this. This is very important. If you know Boris, And so that was also very helpful. I will say that, I asked a lot of questions about a lot of things, and one thing I said is, do you resonate with this, with planning and your mission, vision, and so on? Do you resonate with this? And so one person said, and then they all agreed, we basically go from Shabbat to Shabbat right now. That's basically the extent of our planning, is week to week. Because I did also ask the question of, what do you think's going to happen? How do you see the future? And they all said the same thing. They said, we don't even think about that. We don't even think about that. We are, getting ourselves and our people getting through today. Getting through this week, walking with the Lord, right now, and that, that was a great answer. But that was their answer. A couple of other stories before I continue. There was another man. I didn't put his picture up. It's okay. His name is Yuri, and he lost all of his siblings in the war. And he has a small group now, again decimated by the war and people leaving. So he told me, he said, well, yeah, we have a little place where we meet and we sit on mattresses. And I said, do you need chairs? He said, yeah, we would need chairs. So I gave him some of the funds as well for chairs. Now, Boris Golden and his work with Chosen People has provided a lot of things for a lot of these people. And this fellow Yuri told me how because of the electricity problem, heating problem, in the wintertime, heating problem, that they needed a wood stove. And then they needed the kind of materials to saw wood, quickly to be able to stoke the fire, to have heat. And so these are the kinds of needs, that these people have. Another story, there's a woman named Rosa who, before she was a believer in the early 1990s, was trying to help Jewish people make aliyah to Israel. Now, the Soviet Union had ended, and now there was an opportunity, for a lot of Jewish people to be able to leave and go to Israel. So she was helping them, and she found that the Jewish agencies were not being as helpful as they could. And so she heard about this really large congregation in Kyiv, and so she approached them, and they bent over backwards and helped tremendously. And this made her think, wow, what is it about this group of people? So she began attending, became a believer, became immersed, went back to her hometown, led a whole bunch of Jewish people to faith in Yeshua, and planted a congregation. What an amazing story. In fact, I said to her, were they born Jewish? Do they think they're Jewish? No, yeah. They became disenchanted with Chabad or disenchanted with something else. No, Jewish people. And so that was an amazing story. That was one of the stories of great, wow, really encouraging. They're all encouraging because every story is about tragedy and resilience and faithfulness. One last one is, I told you about Valentin and Tatiana, the leaders of the congregation in Odessa. Well, they also lead a small, satellite congregations, kind of out in the country a little bit, right? And so I spoke there on Saturday evening before our conference. And so I met a lady there. So I was told her story. So her son was being mentored to lead this congregation, right? But he got called up into the army, and he got killed. And his wife and daughter immediately made aliyah, immediately went to Israel. But his mother, stayed right there. And so I met his mother. And her reaction to me was, "Thank you for coming. What a blessing." And I'm, melting away and hugging her and just, may God comfort you, bless you, and love you. And that's stories like that everywhere. I will say that they were astounded that I came. Just me showing up. Going to Ukraine was a tremendous testimony. In fact, just yesterday, I received an email from Valentin, because I thanked him. I sent him a note thanking him for the hospitality that he showed the group. So he responded, "My dear brother, thank you for coming here." It was so touching and wonderful. Now, this is Shavuot. There's Boris. Let me tell you something. Boris is originally from the Ukraine. And so he was really, he had not been there in a very long time. And it was I could just tell that he enjoyed being in the company of these people. And these are his people, that he has mentored, really. And so this is dancing on Shavuot. Every one of these people has a story. You see some of the people that I was telling you about. And here they are just worshiping and so on. There's another picture of it. Let's see what this is. I think this may be let's see if it shows up. Okay, there it is. Now, unfortunately, I can't play, but maybe silently. It's okay if you don't see. Oh, you can hear it a little bit. Oh, you do hear it a little bit. Oh, maybe I can. Okay. So, okay, yeah, it's as loud as it's going to get. Anyway, this is, what a great moment, of worship on Shavuot, appreciating, on Shavuot, receiving the Torah, receiving the Ruach. And to me, moments like this really demonstrated to me, you talk about what Shavuot is all about the presence of the Ruach in our midst, and the joy of the Lord, as Nehemiah said, the joy of the Lord is our strength. And so this was just a real wonderful a moment, and I was just blessed to be able to experience it. So I just wanted to share that. If you, okay, I think we're done. Okay. So anyway, if you want to see more pictures and videos on Facebook, I made 2 posts. One about this conference, and the other one about what I saw and experienced in both Kishinev and in Odessa. And one of the things, this spring has been an amazing time. Good, an amazing time. Thank you so much. An amazing time for me. Because, as you know, I was in Israel for about 3 weeks in April, and here in Ukraine. In fact, walking around Odessa kind of reminded me of walking around Jaffa in southern Tel Aviv. There was a lot of similarities in the way it looked. So what did I see there? In both Israel and in Ukraine, and I will say more so in Ukraine, because Ukraine does not have an iron dome. Ukraine is certainly more vulnerable in certain respects. Is the ability of people to adapt to their situations. I think it's both a human attribute and on top of it, an attribute that the Ruach gives us. The ability to adapt. So people were going about their business, living their lives, doing their thing. I visited, of course, coffee shops and posted a couple of pics from there, and restaurants and things of that nature. What was different is, in both cases, usually I was the only customer. There was not a lot of people. There was not a lot of people walking around other than doing, like going to the grocery store or things of that nature. I will say Odessa is a beautiful city, tree-lined streets and beautiful boulevards and, the sea. And being a runner, it serves a utility purpose in that I can get around and stop and see things and neighborhoods and things of that nature. Very kind people. When I was in Kishinev, I'll just tell you, I didn't post pictures here on that, but Kishinev also was an amazing city. Also, beautiful, kind of quaint city. There I visited a Jewish cemetery, a large Jewish cemetery. When I say large, I mean 25,000 graves, mostly in disrepair. The smaller Jewish community there is trying to fix it up and things of that nature. But it really is like a museum. And walking around the cemetery, I really felt like I was walking among my people, because many people think that there's this direct line from Israel to the United States. Like if you're Jewish, like when I speak in churches sometimes, people will say, "Oh, were you born in Israel?" You know, I mean, it's not a terrible question to ask. I can see how people could come, but no, there was a long journey between Israel and Columbus, Ohio, a long journey, and for 99% of Jewish people that live in the United States, the most immediate past is Eastern Europe somewhere for hundreds of years, you know. And so all of my grandparents, like thousands and thousands of others, come from that part of the world. Ukraine, Moldova, Latvia, and Russia is where my grandparents come from. Not great-grandparents, not great-great-grandparents, but my grandparents all came from there. So my grandmother was born and lived in Kishinev till she was 17 years old. She was born in 1893. When she was 10 years old, there was a very famous pogrom there in 1903. I saw where it began. I saw other things about it. I saw this cemetery. I saw the remnants of a Jewish hospital from the turn of the 20th century. At the beginning of the 20th century, half of the population of the city was Jewish. And in Odessa, hundreds of thousands of people were Jewish. I mean, it was a huge Jewish population in that part of the world. And in that small area of those two cities, you know, if you ever heard of Chaim Bialik or Shalom Aleichem, other poets, writers, Jewish intellectuals lived in Odessa. So Kishinev was not far, and so they wrote extensively about this pogrom, and that inspired the early Zionists of the need for a homeland. And my grandmother, like so many others, after that pogrom, her father sent his children 2 by 2 to America. And that's how my grandmother came to the United States. So it was great to, you know, to see all of that, and also the city itself. And there are other personal observations, just interesting things about it. But suffice it to say that it really was helpful for me. I did meet 3 different people from a Messianic congregation in Kishinev. And so it was good to get their take, their observations on things. So that was, with everybody I met, I was like, hey, nice to meet you. Wow, it's amazing to be here. Now, let me ask you, how are you coping with what's going on? And again, a great resiliency. Another thing that I discovered was how cohesive these congregations are. In other words, they when the war began, they didn't all scatter, just go different places. They kind of like stuck together, and because evidently the congregation was the focus of their lives, and so that really also spoke to me. And then, of course, the joy on Shavuot was remarkable. And the joy in the worship was remarkable. So during the whole time, I kept asking Boris, I said, well, how do you think it's going? You know, how do you think it's going? And so he said that, well, you know, the people are, they like the teaching is good, and, you know, the logistics are okay. But he says, I think that everyone is down. I think that, because he knows these people, right? From the last time I saw them, which was a year ago, that I think that they're kind of like, you know, discouraged. And I had no way of gauging that. You know, I had no way of gauging that. But then I see Shavuot, and I see this real presence of the joy of the Lord. And so it made me think of this verse, you know, in Nehemiah, where Nehemiah says to the people, they're weeping. You know, they're hearing the word of God and they're weeping. And he says, stop crying. The joy of the Lord is your protection, is really what that. The joy of the Lord is your protection. right? And so when you look up, of course, joy is all over the Bible. Amazingly, though, that phrase, the joy of the Lord is your strength, is only in Nehemiah chapter 8, and I believe verse 10. And it's the only place in the Bible where that phrase is found. But there's tons of verses in the Bible, about joy. And most of it is in the context, of worship and experiencing a sense of thankfulness and appreciation and so on. It really is interesting. I could name a whole bunch of verses that talk about joy. In the Brit Chadashah, Yeshua talks about joy. In John 16, joy is a promise of God, right? Here, I'll read a couple of verses. We have a few minutes here. So that's what I really came away with, is the ability of people to adapt. They weren't, I will say this, they were not talking about politics. Now I can also tell you, I don't know what they were saying. They were speaking mostly Russian and some Ukrainian. So that maybe they were. But that did not come across to me like arguing. I did not get that. Okay, I will say, you know how it is with when you're in a social situation when you don't speak the language. This is very true even with my relatives. When I go to Bertuvia, the Moshav where my cousins visit, and if Jason is not with me, it's always the same. We're sitting at a table, we're eating, we're laughing, and once in a while, my cousin will give me a little synopsis of what's going on. I remember that if you're with people that don't speak English, very important to take some initiative and to continue to translate. Don't assume that after I say 5 words of what's going on, you're going to get the rest. So it was kind of like that. There was a few times where I might as well go take a nap somewhere. I don't know what's going on, but they were enjoying each other's company, and that was good enough for me. And so anyway, in John 16, in verse 20, you read, "Truly, truly, I say to you, that you will weep and lament, but the world will rejoice. You will be sorrowful, but your sorrow will be turned to joy. Whenever a woman is in travail, she has sorrow because her hour has come. But when she gives birth to the child, she remembers the anguish no more, for joy that a child has been born into the world. Therefore you too now have sorrow, but I will see you again, and your heart will rejoice, and no one takes your joy away from you." In other words, what he's describing is joy being in the presence of God. And we look forward to that day of ultimate, complete joy, right? Yet, because the Ruach HaKodesh has been poured out, we get to experience that joy. In Acts 13, you read there, and in verse 52, the apostles were filled with joy and the Holy Spirit, right? In 1 Thessalonians 1:6, we read there, Paul talks about the joy of the Holy Spirit, the joy of the Ruach, joy of the Spirit. And you know this in Galatians chapter 5. Joy is one aspect of the fruit of the Spirit. Joy, very much related, by the way, to shalom. You could almost like mirror them together. Shalom, peace and joy. There's something else, even a little bit more. I've been reading this book. I've been reading it already for a long time. I mentioned it in the past. It's called The Voice of Jesus. That's the name of the book, right? Discernment, Prayer, and the Witness of the Spirit by Gordon Smith. It was recommended by our good friend Stuart Dowerman. And here he talks a lot about affect, about the fact that being emotionally connected to God is not the caboose of the train, right? Haven't we all heard that, or maybe even taught it? That first we understand, we learn, and then emotions come at the end. And what this author is saying is that it's all integrated, you know, and to be emotionally connected to the Lord. Joy, you know, I've been in meetings where joy is described. Well, it's not really like joy, like, you know, you know, it's more like being content. Well, what I would say, that's not what I read in the Bible, right? In the Bible, joy is rejoicing. Joy is singing and shouting musical instruments and, you know, and emoting a relationship with God. Not to say, in fact, this author, I really would recommend it. Right after he talks about this joy, he talks about critical thinking. you know. In other words, it's integrated. We need to study, we need to learn, but we need to emote because it's part of what it means to be a human being, right? And I will tell you, what I saw there was that these people know what they're doing. You know, sometimes as Americans, we think that we have a handle on how things are supposed to be, and these are all poor people in other countries, you know, and we're going to go and show them the way and help them out. Well, let me tell you, these people are seasoned religious professionals, spiritual leaders, whatever you know, and it was good. I mean, I have taught this at a UMJC conference, and people learned from it. Of course, you're there thinking, you are one of the most disorganized people I know. How on earth do you teach on these things, right? Well, as Yeshua said about the Pharisees, do what he says, not what he does, right? But anyway, I mean, I taught on this in Russia, and it was really well received at UMJC conferences, and now here in Ukraine. So there's always things to learn, you know. But I said to them, I am here not only to teach and to share, but I am here also to hear and listen, and to bring your stories back. And everything that I said in all of the teaching, you know, I get charged up when I'm speaking. And in fact, Tatiana, Valentine's wife, said to me, she said, you know, you don't seem to get, you're not tired. You know, it was like, this was 18 hours of standing up and speaking, you know, and I don't. When I'm connecting with people, that's, you know, how I am. And that connects, and they were encouraged, and I could just really tell. They appreciated that I came. They appreciated that we came with gifts, you know, and also that I was not there as I know everything and I'm gonna show you a few things. That it was really me learning from them and being able to share some things with them. And I know they went away encouraged, and I told them that we would continue to pray for them and be supportive of them. In fact, I'm thinking, you know, if I can work it out, maybe have with an interpreter, maybe a couple of these people on a Shabbat morning from these different cities come and talk to us, you know, because we have so much to learn from them. I will say my experience there was, you know how I said on Shavuot, it would be great if when I opened my mouth that, you know, well, of course, that didn't happen. So I said that to them. And of course they said, the day will come, right? You know, but you know what did happen there is during that worship time and during these other wonderful times of worship, I mean, their music group from the congregation provided worship at the beginning of every single session for about 15 or 20 minutes of just unbridled worship. What I would say is I did not understand the words, okay, but my heart connected to each and every person, and that we were all speaking the same language. we were all connected. And that's what I went away with. And my prayer for us is that we could have that kind of cohesion, that kind of joy, and that kind of adapting to the world in which we live, so that we are all on the same page and continuing to move forward. And may that be a gift from them to us.